Hey there, and welcome to Dock Diving Tactics, real-world dock diving tips that work like crazy. My name is Megan Ritchie. I'm the owner of High Drive, a handler who competes and trains in multiple dog sports. I currently own 2 curly-coated retrievers, and I am a new dock diving addict, and I guess today I am looking to recruit a few more new addicts as well. So what are we going to cover? First of all, why you're here. So welcome and thank you for joining me. I really hope that through this webinar, we are going to show you how to get from never even having your dog swim before, so introducing them to water all the way through to jumping off the dock for the first time. So hopefully that will prepare you and your dog to compete in dock diving. And we are going to focus on the North American diving dog competition because that's what I'm more familiar with. So that's what we're going to cover. So hopefully by the end of this, you and your dog, or you can have your dog jumping off the dock and ready to compete and participate. So we're going to walk through 3 real-world strategies to introducing your dog to dock diving. So first of all, how to introduce your dog to water. And we're going to start in a natural water environment, so a pond or a lake or a river. And then we're going to talk about how to introduce your dog to the diving dock itself. And then lastly, how to build your dog's confidence and get that first jump off the dock. So before we move on, I want to address a few common concerns that you might be thinking. So if you're thinking, but Megan, my dog doesn't like to swim, we can never do this. I hate to say it, but you're wrong, you can. Just like anything, I think we can train our dogs to do just about anything we'd like them to do. If you think your dog has no interest in it, maybe it's not the sport for them, but you'd be amazed how much you can teach your dog to love this sport. So they can definitely participate, and if you can see this photo here of Tess, she's got her life jacket on, so that can definitely help increase their confidence and love of the water. And if they never learn to swim great, that life jacket can save their life and they can still have fun. So that's great. If you're thinking, but Megan, my dog isn't a retriever, we can't play. Well, you might actually be surprised to hear it, but retrievers aren't necessarily the best dogs at dock diving. A lot of the world record holders are actually whippets, some lighter dogs, some flyball type mixes, so you definitely do not need a retriever to play this game, though of course if you have a retriever they will probably love it. If you're thinking you don't have access to a pool and an instructor so you can't do it, you definitely can. If you've got access to a natural body of water, you can certainly start to train this and even move to compete without ever seeing a pool, though that would not be ideal, but it's definitely doable. So if you're thinking, but I haven't trained my dog in anything before, so there's no way I can do dock diving, you definitely can. So we're going to kind of walk through step by step how you can introduce the pool and water to your dog. So that's exactly what we're going to cover here today. And lastly, if you're thinking, but Megan, my dog doesn't like toys, we can't play. You can. So we're going to, again, just cover some of those tricks that you can use to introduce your dog to water, even if they don't like toys. All right. So how did I get my start in this? I initially started in 2016 with my older dog, Tess. She was my only dog at the time. And a pool had opened up locally. It was not, I'll say, a regulation pool, though it was built to do dock diving training. So there were a few different modifications they had made that I don't think are sanctioned. And that kind of led to a bad situation for Tess and I. Nobody was hurt. It wasn't a terrible situation, but one of the things that was a bit of an issue was the ramp moved. So, I'm sure they designed it that way for some particular purpose, but it just added to Tess's uncertainty, so it wasn't a great situation for us to practice in, and kind of led her to not being too interested in the sport. So we're going to kind of talk about how we can avoid some of that today. So I really wanted to get into it, but again, that was the only pool available at the time. There was a bunch of other, I don't want to say issues, but it was a brand new pool. So I think the facility owners were still working out some of the kinks of how they were going to charge, how they were going to remain profitable, and just how the training side was going to work. So that particular situation did not work for us, and at the time I felt without instruction and a regular pool to practice at, it was just not ideal to get started in that sport at that time. And so I temporarily gave up. My dogs are involved in a lot of sports, and Tess certainly was at the time. And so sometimes that's, I think, just the case. There's a lot of different things we can do. That's why I love the versatility of the breed I have. And so it was easy just to go, okay, well, this isn't the right situation for us, so we're just not going to do this right now. So in 2020, a new pool was built in a neighboring city, and by nearby, I mean they're about a 2-hour drive, hour and a half drive away, but it was close enough that we could go to practice. So I was really excited about that. I saw some friends starting to use it, and I was kind of started to get bitten by that bug again, thinking we should go up and give it a try. And of course, by this time, I think online training had become more available. So even if there wasn't specific training classes, or we couldn't go for like a standard 6-week course, they were starting to be a little bit more available online. AKC had put out some great videos to show how you can get started. So there was just a little bit more available. And finally, I saw that a training seminar had become available there. So this pool was looking to host their first trial. And of course, being newer, there not being much around, there's obviously not a lot of people taking up the sport locally to support that kind of trial. So I think they knew that a seminar or some sort of training would have to be available. And because it was a little bit more rural location, I think the seminar format worked out really well for them, because people could just come in for the day and learn what they needed to, versus like a 6-week course, which, would be hard to commit to, driving an hour and a half every week to attend a 6-week course. So I think that seminar was very popular for them, and we certainly attended and enjoyed it. So from that, I really learned a lot at the seminar. If you've watched our Dog Sports Decoded podcast, I did have a podcast with the instructor, and Gulnaz Zagadulina, and really enjoyed it. She's just a wealth of knowledge, had a lot of experience. So it really gave us the confidence to get going in it and to practice on our own. So from there, again, knowing that the trial was coming up, I wanted to get a few more practices in. So I had only taken my Yacker dog to the first training seminar, Riggs, because he's a little more confident. As I said, Tess had kind of a bad experience. Riggs is a little bit more confident than she is, so I thought he might be a better option to go and attend this first seminar and kind of get the lay of the land. So I took him, and then after it went so well, I thought, well, I should rent the pool and see if Tess has some interest in it, and just get a little bit more practice under our belt before attending this trial. So I rented it a few times. I did end up taking the dogs to another seminar, both of them this time, to keep working on a few things. And Riggs, after our first seminar, was jumping off the dock, basically after his first kind of 10 or 15 minute turn after being introduced, but Tess wasn't ready to, and still has not jumped off the dock yet. I think it'll be a little while before she's ready, but we're going to go through that and kind of how you can progress with a dog that's a little more nervous like Tess is. So again, we attended the practices, and then we attended our first trial. So I was really pleased with how Riggs did. We entered 6 splashes over 2 days, and he was successful in all of those splashes. I think he got 4 of his novice jumps and 2 of the junior jumps, so or qualifying jumps. So I was really pleased with that for a first trial. And I guess we'll see where it goes from there. But again, basically, I think that process with him was within maybe 3 weeks. So going from, he'd certainly swam before, but going from, never been to the dock to a trial within a 3-week period. And I think that's pretty doable for most dogs if you've got the right kind of mindset for your trial. So it was a success. So how can you repeat my success while avoiding some of the pitfalls? So I wanted to talk about 3 real-world strategies to introducing your dog to dock diving. So the first thing we're going to cover is introducing your dog to the water. That's obviously pretty important. So how do you find the right body of water to start? And I guess if your dog's never been to the water, that's kind of our assumption here for our purposes today. So we're going to assume your dog's never seen water, and how are we going to introduce them? So I like to start with a natural body of water, so a pond, a river, a lake, the ocean, and really I would say the reason for this is it's just going to be a whole lot more cost effective. So it's quite expensive. There's obviously a lot of expenses that go into running and owning a dock diving pool that they have to cover. So it's quite expensive to rent it even for quite a short period of time, which is understandable. So I think, to not put that kind of pressure on yourself and feel like, oh, I have to get the most value for my money, I think it's best to start at a natural body of water. That's going to give you the time you need to get your dog comfortable and save you a little bit of money along the way. So having said that, I obviously I don't know your particular area, but if you can find any sort of natural body of water nearby, that's what we're going to start with. So what to look for in that natural body of water. So I like to look for something that's fairly shallow with a gentle decline if we're just starting. So for our puppy or something like that, maybe something that only goes up to their elbows. That's as deep as you need it. So at this point, again, we're just introducing to water. We're not even necessarily expecting them to swim. We just want them to go put their paws in. If we can get them to retrieve a toy, that's great. Play nearby the water, but we really want to make it as low key as possible. So if you have, a retriever or a water-loving dog, it's probably going to be pretty easy for you. If you just walk along the shoreline, they're probably going to be within, in the water within, 10 or 30 seconds. It's not going to take them long to be interested and go kind of splash around in it. So that's really all we're looking for the first day you introduce to water. If they do more, that's great, but don't feel any pressure and don't put any pressure on them to do more than that if they're not comfortable. So, we're going to look for that shallow, gentle decline, and that's just so that they don't worry. So I know one thing, again, with Tess, my older dog, she gets a little bit nervous. A lot of our lakes here have been dammed. They're man-made dams to collect the water off of a river or something like that. So a lot of them have quite steep banks, so it's a bit of a leap of faith to jump into that when you can't feel the bottom. So that makes a lot of dogs nervous, and again, we want to make this as positive as possible for them. So that gentle decline in, they're not going to face a sudden drop off and be surprised that they have to swim and splash around and get scared. So that's what we're looking for with that. If you can find warm water, that's going to help. So again, kind of a shallow pond, something like that's probably going to be a little bit warmer. If you live in a warmer climate, warmer water might be easier to find. Here in Alberta, most of our lakes are in the mountains, or at least nearby me. So it can be early summer anyway, before all the ice has melted, and they're certainly not warm at that point. So finding warm water can be a challenge, but if you're introducing them to water, maybe wait for the ice to melt first. That can be quite jarring and definitely would not promote a love of water the first time they're out there. So if you're worried about it, if you have a dog that's a little thinner skinned or tends to get cold, you can always look at something like a neoprene vest. So once they do get in, that's just going to kind of keep the heat in, keep them warm, keep them happy. So we can do that. I also would look for slow moving water. So again, if you found kind of a stream or a river, I would not throw them into something that's got a lot of rapids to it, really fast moving water. A slight flow is going to be just fine, but no boulders, no really fast moving water. Again, we just want them to be really comfortable in it, so something fairly slow or stagnant is going to be best. We also want to watch, every area is going to be a little bit different, but one thing I just wanted to mention really briefly, I know there's been a lot of news stories of late, different algae and things like that can be dangerous to dogs. So if you're not sure in your area what bodies of water are safe for pets, I know Alberta has a government website that will kind of tell you what they've recorded in certain lakes and things like that they have found these dangerous algae and things. So if you're not sure, I would suggest looking up your own state or county government, whoever governs that environmental body that does that testing, and see. You can also check with your veterinarian and see what might be a concern in your area. They usually are going to have a pretty good idea of where to avoid, but it's also a good idea anytime. Kind of surprised me when I got my dog. It wasn't something I'd thought about a lot. When I got my first dog kind of as an adult, our prior dog growing up as a kid was more of a house pet. We didn't get into a lot of sports or do a whole lot, more rugged outside stuff with her. And the veterinarian, when I got Tess, was telling me that, every time I had to took her to the river to swim or something like that, I should rinse her off when I get home. And I think some of that's that algae issue, some of it's just, runoff from roads might have gunk in it, oil and stuff like that, and we just want to get that off of our dogs. So, that was my veterinarian's recommendation to me, and probably not a bad recommendation. Anytime you're taking them out to a natural body of water, probably isn't going to hurt to rinse them off or give them a bath when you get home, especially if you're not sure of the kind of safety of that pond, I'll say. So how to avoid an injury. So one thing that might be fairly obvious is we're going to look for a clean area with no garbage or debris. This one always kind of disgusts me, but I've certainly gone to a lot of these natural areas and found broken bottles. So there's glass all over, garbage, whether that's twine, leftover picnic stuff, whatever it is. But some of that can certainly cause injury. So watching out and avoiding areas where that might be common, especially the glass and if there's metal or something like that could hurt their paws. So that's something to watch out for. Maybe if you're not a big problem here in Alberta, but if there's alligators or some other natural some other animal or something like that might be a danger in a particular area, whether that's fish or something like that, alligators, clearly, avoid those kinds of natural bodies of water. Something I should have mentioned with the finding the body of water, I didn't really talk about oceans, and I certainly have taken my dog to the ocean. I think it's fine if you're doing an introduction to water there, but I would be really careful how much you throw a toy in the water. It does not take them ingesting a lot of that salt water to get very, very ill. I know Tess got very sick one day down there. She ingested a lot of sand, which was a problem, but also ingested quite a bit of salt water. And in hindsight, we were probably very lucky to avoid an emergency trip to the veterinarian due to dehydration or just too much salt in her system. So it can be a great place to introduce water. Again, for us, it was really warm there. It was a very gentle decline, so it hit all the other boxes. But just be careful how much you play with the toy there and be mindful of that. Okay, so back to avoiding injury. So nice footing is an important one. So if you've got a sandy beach, something like that is great. Rocks can be okay. I would say most of our local lakes and that have pretty smooth rocks, quite rounded river rock. So I think that's all right. It kind of depends on the size of your dog and stuff like that. If they're really big rocks and you have a smaller dog, you might be worried about tripping on rocks or getting your foot stuck or something like that. But if they seem confident with it, and you feel it's safe, then go ahead and practice there. But I would watch out for sharper rocks, more jagged kind of rocks. Bigger rocks always make me nervous. My dogs are pretty big, but one of the lakes I quite like is not ideal because the rocks have been built up there around the edge to kind of support and stop erosion, and they're probably a foot by foot. So to me, that's just too easy to get a foot stuck in there. If they jump at the wrong time, very easy to injure a leg or something. So that's something to watch out for. And again, if you're at the ocean, barnacles can be a really big problem. I know, again, kind of surprised me. I had Tess out at the ocean at this particular beach, and the rocks were quite nice, nice and rounded, so they were soft. And she was just playing on the beach. We weren't dock diving or playing with toys, but there was quite a few barnacles, and another dog came up to her and started playing. This was kind of when she was a puppy, and so they were both running around, having a lot of fun. And I get home, and the underside of her pad is all ripped up, and kind of some blood and stuff that's been torn from those barnacles. So I'd watch out for that. But otherwise, I would say that's about it. So just watch out for sharp rocks, maybe larger rocks, and barnacles to be careful of. So anything like that. Seaweed in that can be dangerous for a couple reasons. One, slipping. And it could be anything, like just any sort of slippery algae or surface that might be on the rocks. But again, easy for them to slip on, and you maybe can't see what's underneath that. If there was broken glass or something, it's going to be harder for you to see. So the other one, avoiding injury. If you have a breed that is known for not particularly being good swimmers, a life jacket can be important. So I know my aunt and uncle had a boxer, and I don't know if that's true or not, but they were told boxers can't swim. So I think any of those breeds that have trouble or are kind of notorious for having trouble breathing, shorter faces, things like that, and then more like the bully breeds that are just not, just broader, just different body shape, may not be the best natural swimmers. So a little bit of help with something like a life jacket can help in that natural environment. It's going to give you peace of mind for sure, and especially if you start getting into somewhere where there's more rapids, as your dog gets more confident, that can be great. If you're also in a natural area, you're trying to get your dog to swim, but there are leash laws, it can be very nice to just hook your leash up to the life jacket and allow your dog to swim that way, so they can help with that. It also gives you something to grab onto if your dog needs a little bit of help. So a life jacket can be a big help if you don't know that your dog can swim, and give you some peace of mind. So a life jacket's never going to hurt. As I kind of touched on, a leash or rope can be a good way to avoid injury. Again, if you get into something with more rapids, and you're worried that your dog might not be strong enough swimmer to get through it, that might not be the best place to practice, obviously, but as kind of a double, triple check, something like a leash or a rope would be good. I get a little leery about them, especially in a natural environment, just because you don't always know what's under the surface. So if I have a loose leash or rope that's just kind of floating along behind my dog, it could get caught in sticks or logs, or kind of just anything under the water that I can't see. It can also get tangled in my dog's legs. So I'm pretty leery to use either of those, especially in a natural environment. But if I had to, I probably would hook up a retractable leash to the life jacket, and then it's out of the water, out of the way, and I'm not worried about, a leash can be a lot, especially if your dog's moving around a bunch, running in and out of the water. It can be a lot to manage in your hands, where a retractable leash is just going to take out that concern. It'll feed your dog as much rope basically as they want, within the limit of what's in your leash, but 30 meters or 30 feet or whatever it allows. So I think I would be tempted to use a retractable leash, but I would be very, very careful using it anywhere where there might be any leash, where there might be something under the water that it could get tangled on. So if you are using just a leash or a rope, that might sink or go under the water or even stay on top of the water. You might want to have a knife with you or something like that. You can cut it off if it does get tangled, because it could certainly pull your dog underneath the water or get them kind of trapped in a rapid that they can't get out of. So I would definitely, if I was doing that, I would definitely carry a knife so I could cut that rope off if it did get tangled in something. But it can also be a safety feature if you need to pull your dog into you if they get into trouble. So, you kind of have to judge your area and weigh those risks. All right, so the next thing to avoiding injury is to make sure you dry them off and keep them warm after you've played. As I kind of mentioned, a lot of our lakes here are very, very cold, even throughout the summer. So you're definitely running a risk of shock if you, kind of plunge your dog into cold water right away. Muscle seizing, things like that, as adults we think about a little bit more than maybe we did as young kids, and I think our dogs are kind of the same. Your puppy might not think too much about it, depending on the breed. If they, retrievers and that tend to be a little bit more hardy for cold water. They were kind of bred to work in it, but if you have a breed that's a little bit more sensitive to colds, first of all, it might not be positive for them, but second of all, they could be just as much at risk of muscle seizing and just cold water shock. So when you're done playing, or they see they're shaking and maybe you're at risk for hypothermia or something, definitely dry them off, get them in the car, get them warmed up. So if you're kind of forced, like I'd say I am, if you're practicing in sort of natural water and doing a lot of swimming and the water is cold, something like a neoprene vest might be ideal to make sure your dog doesn't have those issues. So just keep those muscles warm, their body warm, and reduce the risk of shock by using a neoprene vest. And so how do we start our dog from scratch? Finally getting into kind of the introduction to the water. So if it was me, I would find that nice shallow body of water and I would just go stand near it, walk near it. I would probably mostly ignore it from my standpoint and just kind of let the dog discover it themselves. They're probably gonna, within 10 seconds, go and start to check it out, put a toe in, something like that. And if they do that, you can encourage them. But more or less, I'd kind of ignore it and pretend it's not there and let them discover it on their own. Most dogs probably aren't going to need a whole lot of encouragement to go in. Especially if you're drawn to dock diving, you probably have a breed that has some sort of affinity to water, or you already know that your dog likes water. So that's how I would introduce it. Just kind of play, walk near the shore. If they don't go in on their own, you can kind of jazz them up playing next to it. Maybe you can walk in a couple steps and again just kind of walk along the shoreline, but if you're a couple feet in, that's going to give them the confidence to go into, likely, or they'll just want to come over and see where you are. So it'll just be kind of that, make them just that little bit unsure, where they have to kind of pluck up the courage to come in and visit with you, and that's probably going to be enough to get them in. So either of those two is where I would start. If you're really struggling and neither of those are working, kind of use your dog's motivation. So if your dog is really motivated by people, that's probably where I would walk a little bit further out into the water myself. If you're the big motivator, if a family member is a big motivator, maybe have them go out and you could play kind of a recall game between, one of you on shore, one of you in the water. So you could encourage them that way. You can encourage them with a toy if they're very toy driven. Just throw a little toy a couple inches into the water, let them go pick them up, reward them when they come back, throw a couple throws on the shore, and then throw one more in the water a couple inches in. So we can kind of slowly build. If they'll go retrieve it from the water, we can slowly build that further and further out. But to start with, we just want them to kind of put a paw in. That's really all we're looking for. So if you can find a toy that'll float, toss it in a couple inches or a foot into the water as they get more confident, and then reward them by throwing a couple more on the shore, and then repeat that again. So a toy is great if your dog is toy motivated, and if they're not toy or person motivated, or it's not working at this particular time, because sometimes they're just nervous enough that they're not interested right now. You can try food as well. So if you have a food motivated dog, you can teach it the way we would teach kind of any other luring type exercise. So all we're going to do, I would probably stand in the water a foot or so in, show my dog a treat, and encourage them, maybe at first they're just going to stand on the shoreline, not with their foot in the water, but just really, really close. Or I can reward them just for looking at the water. So they look at the water, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to give them a treat. And then maybe, they're going to get the nail on their little front toe in. And I'm going to say yes and give them a treat. And I can use that food as a lure if that will work, and kind of lure them a couple steps into the water, give them a treat. So I can use food as well. So I'm either going to use people, I'm going to use toys, or I'm going to use food. And, for most of you, you probably never have to use this. But if you do find you're in a bit of a bind, your dog's not going into the water, those are definitely 3 strategies you can use. So, like I said, for probably 90% of you, just, opening the car door and letting them see the water, they're probably going to be in there before you know it. But if you are having trouble, those are the 3 things I would use. And if you are, whether that's using people, toys, whatever it is, I would gradually increase the distance, and I would mix up the distances you're asking them to go in the water. So I wouldn't go from, okay, get your toes wet, to, okay, I'm going to throw the ball 30 feet into the water and go swim and get it. That's obviously a big jump. So some dogs probably can do it, and some are naturally going to be more likely to do it, but other dogs are going to need a little bit more help in between those 2 steps. So like I said, it might be kind of throwing a ball an inch into the water, and then we're going to throw 2 on the shore. And then maybe I can throw 2 feet into the water, and then 1 on the shore. And then I can throw it 5 feet out, and maybe I'll throw it 5 feet out. At this point, if they're confident with that, maybe they're swimming a little bit, I can throw it 5 feet out for 10 throws, and then maybe I'm going to throw it 2 feet out, and then I'm going to throw it 10 feet out. So just vary it a little bit so that they're going to get, like, okay, that 10-foot throw is a bit of a stretch, a bit of a confidence stretch for them. It's going to require, a little stronger swimming, longer distance, and then they're going to get an easy throw after that to kind of build up that confidence again and interest in the toy. So we don't want to keep pushing them. Every throw, every swim is harder. We kind of want to mix it up, especially when they're first starting, so that they remain interested and it remains positive for them. So that difficult thing, and then maybe a couple easy things or average things, and then something difficult again. So we're just going to mix that up. And if your dog's not going in for toys at this point, you can do the same thing with people or treats, right? So, if you're using yourself or people, that probably means you have to wade out. So maybe you're doing recall games from the shore to you in the water. So, vary how far out in the water you are. But hopefully we're going to encourage them to go in after a toy or something else, rather than you, because at a competition, you can't be in the water. So we do want to get away from that. But okay, so we've got them in the water now, and now we want to build foundations to move to the dock. So they're already thinking the water is positive, and if they're not, then we need to go back and just keep working on those simple steps until they have confidence. And what would not confidence look like? So maybe they're not ready. I would say still kind of hesitant to go into the water. If you're luring them, we still need to keep working on that, and probably build on some toy drive as well. So anytime they just seem nervous or hesitant to go in the water, or just kind of are not willingly going in on their own, ideally I would open the car door, they see I have a water toy, I just want them to kind of plunge into the water. So if we're not at that point, just keep encouraging them, keep it a little lighthearted, and don't put too much pressure on them. I'm going to say 90% of dogs will definitely work through this. Some of you are probably reading this or seeing this and going, oh my god, this is so simple. But I want to, for 90% of you, that's going to be the case. But for the 10% of you that are struggling, I wanted to cover it. All right, so now that we're confident with the water, our dog is comfortable swimming on a gradual incline. So again, we've picked our natural body of water, so it's quite gradual to to get into the water. They're not having to jump off a dock at this point or anything like that. We've got, good footing. There's no surprises. Maybe they can even see through the water, so they're not too unsure. So how do we start building that foundation for the dock itself? So one thing we can do is increase the grade of that entrance into the water. So a steeper bank, something like that, is going to encourage them to start to jump off of the solid ground into the water. So we can make that grade a little bit steeper, and that can be either on the shore or in the water itself. So I kind of mentioned earlier in this webinar that that's something Tess has always struggled with. She doesn't like that sudden drop off. So for something like that, increasing the grade adds that degree of difficulty, and that's where a life jacket can help, for one thing, because that'll just kind of keep them buoyant. So they don't even really have to make that decision to leap into the water. The life jacket's just going to kind of lift their feet off of the ground, and then they'll be swimming, and it'll keep their kind of back level so they can use their feet properly and things like that without kind of doing that massive doggy paddle, splashing everywhere, getting kind of nervous. So watch your dog's comfort level. If they get hesitant to jump in the water, maybe you've pushed them too far. But I'd say a little bit of hesitation is okay as we increase the difficulty. You just kind of have to judge your own dog's sensitivity to that. I know Riggs it probably could be a vertical cliff and he would jump in, but Tess is going to take a lot longer to build up to that incline. So we need to know our dog, but if you're seeing a little bit of hesitation and uncertainty as you increase that difficulty, that's going to be normal, but we don't want them stressing at the shore for a long time. And that's something we'll take to the dock, but we just want them, 1 or 2 seconds of being like, oh, I'm not sure. Okay, I'll jump in and do it. That's okay. But I don't want them to stress on the shore for, 30 seconds or a couple minutes. That's obviously pushed them too far. But increasing that grade is going to be something that will definitely help us once we move to the ramp on the dock. So then we want to look for their confidence in launching into the water. So as we increase that grade, are they jumping from the shore into the water? That's really what we want to look for. So if they're confidently pushing off, when they hit either that drop off in the water or from shore into the water, as soon as we see them kind of doing that launch, that's a great time to start thinking about moving to the dock. So at that point they're confident and we know they're having fun because they're kind of willingly doing it. So that's a great time to make that move, and a good time to introduce your dock diving toys. So as we introduce our dog to the water, we might just be using regular toys. Obviously, they probably have to float if we're throwing them in the water, but you might be using tennis balls or whatever it takes to positively introduce your dog to water. Tennis balls can be good. They're not the best for dock diving. Something I hadn't really considered, but G had mentioned, I'm not sure if it was in our podcast or in our seminar, but it can be really slippery for dogs, like especially some of the floating, I'll say like the chuck-it balls. Can't recall what they're called, but like those orange ones. But if your dog punctures them, they can sink. So I've had both happen. So if you have a dog that's going to obsess with this sunken ball and risk drowning as they try and find it, that might not be a great choice. But even if the ball is in good shape and it's floating along the water, it can take your dog a few bites to kind of get it because it's slippery when it's wet, which isn't something we want when we do our dock diving. But if your dog loves balls and that's the only way you can introduce them to the water, of course, go ahead and use it. But at this point, they're confident in the water, so we can start to introduce our actual dock diving toys. So I'm going to talk about some of the toys a little bit later, but this might be bumpers, it might be a floating frisbee, Kong wubbas are really popular, but basically, I would say anything you can throw well. Everybody's going to be a little bit differently. If you're very comfortable throwing a frisbee can be a good choice. If you're not good at throwing a frisbee's not a good choice. If you throw in really windy conditions, you might want to look for a heavier toy. Kong makes a bumper that kind of has 2 balls on the end. It's orange. It's a little bit wider, so it'd be good for a medium to larger dog. But it's a nice heavy toy. It floats up high on the water. So it's going to be easy for you to throw where I want it. So a lighter toy, especially in a wind, might be hard to place it where you want it in front of your dog. And when it comes to actually going off the dock, we kind of want to throw it. So if your dog can jump 10 feet, from I'll say the edge of the shore, wherever it is, 10 feet into the water, you probably want to place that toy at least 5 feet in front of that. So you're probably going to try and throw it 15 feet away. So they're going to jump their 10, then they're going to swim the last 5 and pick up the toy. So a toy you find easy to throw that you will be able to use on the dock, this is a great time to introduce that. So it's not like, oh, here's this new toy when we're in this new environment on the dock. We already want them to enjoy and like playing with that toy in this natural environment. All right, so at this point our dog's confident. They're jumping in for their new dock diving toy that they don't know what that is yet. So now we're ready to actually introduce the dock. So you're going to have to find a dock somewhere near you. If you go to any of the associations, they should have some sort of link to either events or, I'll say, sanctioned facilities that would have a recognized dock. I know the North American Diving Dogs does have a place on their website like that. So that's what we want to look for, just anywhere local that has a dock diving pool. And if for some reason those websites fail you, you can always just search for dock diving pool in your area. So just Google it, I guess. And if you are at a dock diving pool, not everybody is going to have access to their own pool and dock that they can use on their own property. So if you are going to a facility that offers it, they likely do have training classes. And if you can attend a training class, it's probably mandatory if you rent the pool to have somebody there helping and supervising. But I would absolutely recommend you take a class or attend a seminar or something like that. It's all great and nice for me to give you this recommendation here on the webinar, but very different to have somebody in person that can actually address what they're seeing in your dog and kind of help you with that or work with that. So while I do hope to help you through this webinar, somebody in person being able to help you, and hopefully with some of the information you have here, will give you a little bit of a background on what they're trying to accomplish and make that a lot easier process for you. So we're at the dock. We've taken our dog. I would recommend you bring your life jacket with you, and then whatever toy you're using to throw for your dog into the water. So something they already like and will like to retrieve, very likely. And sometimes a new toy can help. There's always that. You bring a new toy home for your dog or whatever from the pet store, and they're like rifling through the bag to try and get the toy. So sometimes a new toy will help if you think they're not interested in the toy they have. Sometimes variety helps if you have a dog that kind of gets bored of toys quickly. So having a few different toys to use can help. And sometimes even borrowing toys. So it's like little kids, right? The toy somebody else has is always the best toy. That's the toy you need to play with. I think our dogs are sometimes the same. So even if you play with, a specific Chuck It bumper or something like that, if your dog gets kind of bored of it, sometimes using the exact same Chuck It bumper that somebody else has used with their dog, sometimes that's enough to keep your dog interested. So bring a toy or a couple toys just in case you need them, and a life jacket, and you should be set. So once we arrive at the pool, we are going to actually start our dog on the ramp, not on the dock. So for any sanctioned dock diving pool, there should be a 30-foot, they would call dock, and that'll be astroturfed or have carpet or something that your dog can get a good grip on when they are jumping off the dock itself. But right next to it, it could be on either side, there should be a ramp that leads into the water. And this is actually where we want to start our dog on the dock. So we're going to go to the side, to the ramp. And some dogs are going to progress off the ramp a lot quicker than others. As I said, my dog Tess has been at it. I think we're about 4 weeks in now. And she has still not gone off the dock. And it might be a couple months before she gets off the dock. I'm not going to push her. She's 9. She doesn't have to do it if she doesn't want to. But like I said, Riggs did it in about 10 minutes. So really it's going to depend on your dog's confidence level and their personality a little bit. So we're going to start at the ramp, and that should lead, I'd say at least 2 or 3 feet into the water, likely longer. should be kind of a non-slip surface. So if your dog is already comfortable with the water, we just have to tell them that the water in the pool is the exact same thing as the water that they've found in their local lake. So that's all we're going to do. So for me, my dogs are toy driven, so that will work for me. So I would just throw my toy a couple inches into the water, but still on the ramp. So you basically could just roll, if you had a ball, just roll the ball down the ramp. It's going to splash into the water, touch the water, and I just want my dog to run down, grab it, and come back. So that's all we're going to do to introduce it. And I guess why the ramp is there at a competition side, so once they're trained, is really so the dogs know how to get out of the water. So once they start jumping in, that's great, but somehow they still have to get off the dock. So it's just as important, even if your dog is very comfortable dock diving, they need to know how to get out of the water, because that's actually where a lot of them panic. So by starting on the ramp, we're also just showing them where the ramp is, and so they're getting used to going in and out of the water off that ramp. So they know, okay, jump in. Eventually they'll know to jump in, but I'm going to go into the water, and then I'm going to come back, I'll say on a particular side, but I'm looking for that ramp to come back out. And once we get throwing the ball in or the toy in further, we want our dog to know where that is, so they're going to jump out, get the toy, and then they're going to swim back to the ramp. So we're kind of imprinting that muscle memory or mental memory pattern already. So we're going to start at the ramp, and then I'm just going to gradually start to increase how far I'm throwing that toy in. So whatever toy my dog likes, like I said, I'm going to start. My first throw is probably an inch or two into the water. Maybe if they're comfortable with that, I'm going to throw it 2 feet into the water, but still on that ramp. So I'm still keeping it straight out in front of me, and very easy for them. At this point, they probably don't have to swim. They're just going to go out, grab it, come back. So I'm going to start with it that simply, and just gradually increase the distance. And as we did on our natural body of water, I'm going to switch that up a little bit. That's how I'd like to do it. So, because I don't want to push my dog and be like, okay, here's 5 really difficult throws in a row. Maybe I'm going to do 1 difficult one and then 2 easy ones, and then 1 medium one and then 1 easy one, and then a difficult one and then an easy one. So I'm just going to vary it again based on how confident my dog is looking. A lot of dogs, when you first throw it, like it gets to that point where they have to decide to swim or jump, right? They can't just walk out and get the toy anymore. You'll see that's where the hesitation starts. So if your dog's hesitating at any point, we still do need to push them, because of course we want them to swim or jump in. But that's where I would really start. So it's 1 difficult one, and then 1 or 2 confidence building ones, because we don't want to push them all the time to do something really hard that they're finding hard at that time. And if they won't engage with you at all, you can go up onto the dock, you can throw it away from the water. So maybe it's going to be 1 throw 2 inches into the water, and then I'm going to throw 2 or 3 throws on the dock itself, just to build up their confidence, to get them engaging and playing with the toy again. We want it to be really positive. So something hard, then something easier. All right, so we're going to start slow. We're going to kind of alternate our difficulty levels. I would definitely recommend using a life jacket your first time in the pool, even if your dog is a good swimmer, because it really isn't about their swimming capability. I think a lot of people, and myself included, kind of have that mindset of like, oh, my dog's a good swimmer, they don't need a life jacket. And it's odd to say, but the life jacket really isn't for swimming ability. If your dog needs it for help or confidence to swim, that's an added bonus. But really, when we're first at the pool, that life jacket is going to give us, as the handler, something to grab onto. So if they're having trouble getting out of the pool, if they come onto the ramp sideways, something like that, it's going to give us a little bit of a handle to hold on to haul them up onto the ramp, so they don't get injured, don't get scared, don't drown themselves. And a lot of dogs you'll see, and I think both of mine, especially if they don't know where that ramp is and they haven't quite figured out how to get out of the pool, you'll find they'll go to the rim of the pool, and they'll try and get out there. And so a lot of them will try and climb the pool walls and things like that, and or the ramp, or fencing. They'll try and get back onto the dock where they jumped off, and can really kind of panic and do a lot of that doggy paddling. So it's not that they can't swim in a normal circumstance, but kind of their brain is somewhere else, right? They're trying to work through a lot of other things. So having that life jacket initially is just going to give them a little bit more support as they figure out those other things. So as they figure out how to use the ramp, where it is, how to get out of the pool. And so if they panic because they can't find their way out, and maybe they can't hear you very well, or if the room is kind of echoey, something like that, and they're not really sure where you are, if they do panic, they're not going to drown themselves, and it gives you something to hold on to. So again, you can kind of guide them out of the pool if you have to, or just give them that added buoyancy to give them a couple seconds to orient themselves to figure out where they need to go next. So that's really what the life jacket is for once we get to the pool. Of course, if you want to use it forever, you can use it and compete with it on, even if you'd like to. But for the first time in the pool, I would recommend you leave it on for that reason. So I know that's often a misconception, so it can be a good way to start. So the other thing when we're introducing the dock, you should probably go and be prepared to get in with them. Depending on the pool itself, sometimes they will have, say, a staff member or instructor go in the pool, and again, that's where the life jacket might come in handy, because they might... I won't say pull your dog into the pool, but they might kind of guide your dog in a little bit, or especially for a dog that's having some struggles, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but if for some reason, let's say they carry your dog into the pool, set them in gently, they might just use that life jacket handle to kind of guide them back to the ramp. So they're going to lift your dog in, and then your dog's going to swim out themselves. So that can be one way we kind of back chain that a little bit. But be prepared to go in with them if you have to rescue a toy, or give them a little bit of a confidence boost, just like we did at the pond or the lake. If your dog's a little more person driven than toy driven or food motivated, you might have to go in a little ways with them. I find often my dogs will both go in the water without me, but often I'm going in a couple steps to pick up a toy or to help lift them out, something like that. So at least be prepared to go in kind of up to your knees. If we want this to be positive, so if the water's warm, that's going to help in the pool. A lot of pools are not heated, but definitely a bonus if it is. And of course, warm weather helps. So if you're in a warm climate, that's going to be a lot nicer for them to jump into a little bit of a cooler pool. I know kind of in our area, or Calgary area, notoriously the past few years, the first dock diving event of the year is held in April at Spruce Meadows, and it almost always snows that weekend for whatever reason. So not the best place to introduce a pool if it's snowing outside and they have to jump into this freezing cold water. So keep that in mind. And maybe just look for another way to introduce the dock if possible. So I touched on this a little bit already, but bring a favorite toy, and again, kind of that dock diving toy. So you might have to use, whatever your highest value floating toy is the first time you go to use the dock. Your dog might be a little more nervous and need that higher value toy, but eventually we're going to want to switch to whatever competition toy you want to use. But for the first introduction, definitely use whatever toy you need to get them confident and happy in the pool. And it's very easy to say, but hard to do. But I would recommend you kind of start with no expectations. And it's something I've heard a lot at various seminars, and kind of, I'll say, catch myself saying, and certainly did when Tess first tried. But you're going in thinking, oh, my dog loves the water, they love to play, they love to swim, this is going to be no problem. So we go in with the expectation that, really, we're probably all expecting them to jump off the dock in the first 10 minutes. And that's going to be the exception, not the rule. So if you can go in with no expectations, you're going to come away blown away, I think, with how quickly your dog picks it up. But try not to put a lot of pressure and expectations on them. It's really hard if you're renting the pool, or if you're attending a trial and trying a try it or something like that. and expecting immediate results. But, you've got that time pressure. You've only run to the pool for half an hour or 15 minutes or 4 minutes on a regular run, whatever it is. It's easy to feel that pressure, that time pressure. So you kind of expect things to, you're trying to make things happen in a hurry. And as much as possible, try not to do that. Like I said, Tess, we're 4 weeks in. She does like to swim. She is still not jumping off the dock. And that's okay. As long as we keep it positive, I have no doubt she will eventually jump off the dock. But if I put a lot of pressure on her, it might never happen, right? A bad feeling or introduction to the pool is going to always have that negative connotation. So however long it takes, it's going to take. But the more positive and the less stress we can put on them, the quicker they're going to pick it up. Often we think, oh, my dog loves swimming, they love retrieving, they're going to pick this up so quickly, and they will, but you have to get them over that uncertainty with the new environment. So we just have to get over that quick little hump of, I don't know what a pool is. This water looks different. This situation is different. Why do I have spectators? Who's this new person, with me? Often if we go play in a natural environment, there might not be a lot of other people around. And then if your first introduction is at a competition, you might have 50 or more people around the dock watching, and photographers and all kinds of things. So there can be a lot of added distractions, and it's not that your dog won't learn or can't make that connection, but it might take a little bit of time just to get over that initial hump of, is the water in the pool the same as the water in the lake? And yes, it is, and yes, they'll get over that. But we just have to take our time and let them do that themselves. So, as I kind of said, making sure you're starting in the right environment. So, just as we were looking for, certain things with our natural body of water, there's definitely some things we can look for when we're starting to positively introduce the dock for the first time. So, one thing I would not recommend that you start at a competition. I think at NAD this is called a try it, if you can avoid it. This is a hard one because I know when I was first interested, really that was the only way you could try it. There was not a dock diving pool locally at the time when I kind of first heard about dock diving. There was shortly after, but at the time that was really the only place you could go and experience it. So if you don't have anything local, you might be kind of stuck going to a competition or driving quite a ways to try a pool. But if you can avoid it, I really would recommend avoiding it. If your dog has done a lot of other sports, it might be okay, but there's a lot of pressure on yourself if you're attending a trial. You've got a short period of time that you have to work in the pool, so you're going to feel more pressure to put pressure on your dog to do, achieve a certain thing, whether that's jumping off the dock or swimming or whatever. But you've kind of got that time limit in mind when you're going in, and that's going to put pressure on you whether you kind of think about it or not. So if your dog's already used to sort of a competition environment, they might be a little bit better with that, but it's going to be hard for any dog to learn a new thing in that sort of crazy environment. A quieter environment is usually better. So if you can go to a seminar or rent the pool or attend a class, I think that's going to be a lot easier. There might only be a handful of other handlers and dogs around. You're only going to be working one at a time in the pool itself. So it's just a whole lot less commotion and excitement to distract your dog. So they're going to be able to focus on what you're asking them for. All right, so what are some common problems we see when introducing the dog? So one of them, just like the water, is if your dog, or just like the natural pond environment, natural water environment, your dog won't go into the water. So they're a little bit unsure. They like their local lake, but they're not sure this pool thing is the same thing. So what can you do? Basically the same thing we tried at the lake. So if they're food motivated, you can try and lure them in with the food a little bit. Lure them to the edge of the ramp, give them a treat, and maybe then go play off the ramp a little bit. And then bring them back down, try and lure them in, or do a hand target, something like that. Try and get their toes wet. say yes, give them their treat, go up and play, do something else for a little bit. So we can use food to lure if the pool will allow you to do that. You can also use people. Kind of a funny story. At the first seminar we attended, there was, I think it was a Labradoodle that was really struggling to go in. And again, the dog loved the water and kind of that natural environment. But in that pool environment, it wasn't quite sure what the heck this pool thing was. So they tried luring with food, they tried toys, the dog's favorite toys, that wasn't working. And really by chance, the dog caught sight of one of the other owners and, that was outside taking some photos of the dog and the handler. And the second that dog saw that other owner, they just jumped in the pool to see him. The owner called, the person outside the pool called the dog a little bit and kind of encouraged them to come. Dove in 10 seconds, and just like did laps around the pool after that. So swam quite a distance, and super fast swimmer. But that's all it took for that dog. He was more person motivated than food or toy motivated. So that's all it took, is just seeing that person on the other side. And honest to goodness, within 10 minutes that dog was jumping off the dock. But it was jumping for the person on the outside and would grab the toy kind of on the way, but would swim the whole perimeter of the pool to get back to the ramp and follow this person. But just needed that confidence boost. And after that, it would just jump in for the toy once it kind of figured out the game. But just using that person was the motivator that dog needed. So you definitely can use people. And again, people in the pool will help too, right? If you have to go into the pool or have the instructor in the pool, you can do that. Toys we kind of already talked about. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail there. We're just going to kind of alternate our distances and throw easy and difficult by whatever our dog deems easy and difficult. So we can do that. And so most of the associations, I would say all of them, have rules against, I'll say dropping your dog in, pushing your dog in, so we do not want to do that. One, because it's against the rules, and two, because it is not going to leave a very positive memory on your dog. So they're not going to have a very positive association with the pool if they just get pushed into it. So we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. Sometimes though, if our dog is just really stressing at the edge of the pool and you're able to, lifting them into the water and kind of, if you're in the pool itself, so you'd have to go in with them or the instructor in with them. But if they're kind of small enough or light enough that you can lift them in, you might pick them up, take them 5 or 6 feet into the pool, gently let them down. Again, they're going to be wearing a life jacket. And then you can just kind of point them at the ramp and gently guide them while they swim out themselves. So that's what we want to do if we have to. But again, that's kind of a last resort sort of thing. And we're just going to kind of back chain that result. So we're going to lift them in, let them swim out if they can. You might have to support them a little bit if they're not a strong swimmer. And that life jacket will certainly help. But yeah, we're going to put them in the water. Once they're a little bit more comfortable with that, they'll let you lift them in, swim back out. You can start to put a toy in their way. So you're going to lift them in, you're going to put a toy kind of between them and the ramp, and then they're going to swim to the toy. They may or may not pick up the toy and then go to the ramp. So we're going to slowly build up that way. And really, if your dog's already swimming in the natural environment, once they do that a few times in the pool, they're probably going to be comfortable to just jump in after a toy. So once they kind of figure out, oh, this is still just water, even though it's, looks really blue or is in a funny looking pool or whatever, they're going to catch on pretty quickly once they get over that initial fear. If you're able to, lifting them in, again, last resort, but it is a possibility. My dogs are really just too heavy. I could not do that. So if you have a lighter dog, that's going to be possible. If you have a 200-pound Mastiff, you're probably not going to force them into the pool, no matter what. So it's going to depend a little bit on your dog, and to some extent how willing and trusting they are in you too. If your dog trusts you to take them into the water and they will happily swim out, you might be able to do that. If that really freaks your dog out, good luck catching them and trying to do it the next time. So That's another reason I would avoid it if you can, but if your dog is trusting and comfortable with it, it's an option. And again, if your dog isn't that interested in the toys, and you've been, maybe they normally are, but for whatever reason they won't play with them in the water, you can play with them on the ramp or up on the dock itself. So we're going to build up that drive away from the water, build up their confidence a little bit more, build up that drive a little bit more, and then we can go back to the ramp and try. If they go in and catch it, great. We're going to go back up to the ramp and the dock and reward them there. So we're going to alternate between something easy and something more difficult. But this is where having a few different toys can help. Again, sometimes a novel toy will make the trick or do the trick. Sometimes another dog's toy will do the trick. But whatever we need to do just to encourage them to engage with us and play with those toys. And then we're going to, just kind of keep associating. So we're going to have that positive experience on the dock, and then kind of maybe a little bit scary for them on the ramp, and then positive up on the dock again. And we're just going to alternate until, they're just not concerned with it. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to start very shallow, even just throwing on the ramp. We can use people as a motivator. We can use another dog as a motivator. If you have another dog that's, with Tess, I could use Riggs as a motivator. So if he's really confident, and this actually might be how we introduce the dock with her. Just show him jumping off the dock a few times with her loose out there with him, and see if that kind of gives her the confidence to try it herself. So another dog can be a good choice. Riggs is a little pushier than Tess, though he is scared of her because she's older and a girl, so he does have a little bit of the fear God put in him from her. But he can be kind of pushy and just kind of oblivious to the world around him. So I want to watch and make sure that he doesn't push her in, he doesn't make her nervous by kind of dorking around on the dock before he jumps in. So, sometimes you have to use your judgment. I wouldn't put a lot of dogs out there. Make sure your dogs get along, obviously, before trying that. And if you see your dog jumping on you, so if your first dog jumps in, or say the dog you're trying to teach jumps in, and then your other dog that's your confidence boosting dog jumps on top of them, maybe stop. So if they're injuring each other, definitely take that other dog away. But if they get along, and you think it might be positive, you can also use another dog as a motivator. As I said, you can try different toys, and you can build toy drive off the ramp and off the dock. So if your dog is not toy driven at home and is not toy driven at the lake, they're not going to magically become toy driven at the pool. So we need to build up that toy drive. I don't have a ton of time here to go into that. But there's some different ways you can do that, not in our 15 minutes of paid dock time, if they're not already toy driven. So work on the toy drive at home, and when they're ready, move to the dock. So when is your dog ready to move off the ramp onto the dock? So for this, it's hard to believe we've spent all this time, and we've really just done mostly ramp work. So to introduce our dogs, I would basically throw, I'll say in a straight line, out, from the ramp out into the water. So that's how I'm going to introduce it, gradually building up the distance and gradually having my dog, ultimately we want them to jump off the ramp into the water. And that's really what we're looking for to get them onto the dock. Once they start jumping off the ramp, it's time to try them to jump off the dock. But as kind of an in-between step, we can ask them to jump off the side of the ramp. So before we do that, we're looking for them to be confident in going and picking up the toy and coming back. So they're not hesitating at the side of the pool. We're looking for them to be jumping into the water, as I said, rather than walking in and just kind of floating out or swimming. So at this point, if they're like really engaged, really enthusiastic, they're jumping off the ramp into the water, I'm going to try and get them to jump off the side of the ramp. So that's my next step. So because of course the ramp is an incline, it's kind of different difficulty levels, I'll say. So if they're standing in the water on the ramp, it's going to be less challenging than if they're 2 feet out of the air on the ramp, so closer up to the dock. So Depends on your dog a little bit. For Riggs, I probably wouldn't worry too much about it, but for Tess, I definitely started lower on the ramp, and really they need to know that the ramp ends and you have to kind of take off on your own from there. So for some dogs like Tess, that's a real challenge. For other dogs like Riggs that are more confident, it's not a problem at all. So sometimes you'll see them kind of stand at the edge. They got their toes on the edge of that ramp. They're looking out to where you've thrown their toy, and you might see them kind of pawing at the water. They might whine or cry, and then eventually we want them to jump in. So once they're jumping in confidently off that ramp, they kind of know what we're asking them for, and you can kind of move that at an angle. So if I start throwing, a straight line off the ramp, like when we're just starting our ramp work, into the water, they're jumping in. The next step, maybe I'm going to move 25 degrees into the center of the pool from there. So they're still kind of going off the ramp, a little straighter, but at the end of the day, I kind of want it to be a 90 degree, right off the ramp into the center of the pool kind of thing. So they're jumping away from me off the ramp into the middle of the pool. And at that point, if they're confident with that, it's definitely time to try the dock itself. So now our strategy number 3. So how do we move then from the ramp to the dock? Well, I've already told you what we're looking for. So if they're on the ramp, they're jumping off the ramp into the water, or thinking it's time to move to the dock, we're just going to head up to the dock. I would probably, there's a few different methods you can use. The AKC has a really good video on this for sort of how to throw, how to encourage your dog to go after your throw. So one I would say is more of a restrained throw. So you're going to hold your dog, you're going to throw the toy into the water, and then you're going to release your dog and they're going to go fetch it. So they're not chasing the toy, you're placing the toy in the water. Then they're going to get released, whether that's a release command from, say, a sit-stay, or you're just going to release from holding them. But then they're going to run in, basically catch the dead toy, and bring it back to you. So that's one method. And then the other method is to throw a toy, and they're going to chase it and try and kind of catch it in the air. So 2 different ways to kind of motivate them. But I would say, to start with, you probably want to start with the restrained method. That can build up some frustration, which is just going to, if they're already kind of confident, it might just give them that little bit of extra impulsion to jump off the dock. So we're going to move them right to the edge of the dock, as close to kind of the water as we can. So the very edge, have their tiptoes on the edge as much as possible. We're going to hold, in this case, their life jacket is where it would start, but if you're not wearing one, you could certainly just hold on to their collar or kind of give them a hug. And we're just going to kind of hold them back a little bit, throw our toy in, and release them, and kind of see what they do. So some dogs might jump in right away, but a lot of dogs are kind of going to get a little bit frustrated. They're going to kind of dance around at the edge of the pool, whine, and then very likely kind of fall in. Very ungracefully, usually the first time. They kind of might dive in head first. They can lose their footing on the edge. We're not going to push them. We're not going to pressure them. We're going to let them get kind of stressed out and frustrated to the point where they just jump in and get it. So ideally, of course, in a perfect world, we're going to have our person holding them. We're going to throw our toy. We're going to release them, and they're just going to jump in. So wouldn't that be great? So we don't want them stressing at the edge of the dock. That's definitely not ideal, but very common the first time or two until they actually jump into the pool. So if they jump into the pool right away, that's awesome. Congratulations. You're kind of done. But what if they don't? So if they're kind of stressing, we don't want them, a little bit of stress, a little bit of hesitation is okay. I don't want to give like a specific timeline, but let's say 30 seconds to 2 minutes, just to give you a bit of a rough idea. It can sound horrible. Riggs screeches unbelievably, or did screech unbelievably when he started. Just screamed at us for having the, gall to throw his toy in the water where he couldn't get it. So he was very unhappy with us, but eventually he just fell in and went and got it and was happy as could be again. And usually once they do their first jump or two in on their own, they're probably going to be kind of good for life. So we just need that first 1 or 2 jumps, and we've got them, so to speak. But what do you do if you've made it through that 2 minutes, your dog's really stressed out? We don't want to encourage that. So a lot of people, myself included, don't want to reward our dog by then opening up the gate and letting them go down the ramp and getting the toy that way, because that will just encourage them to keep doing it. So what do we do instead? What I would recommend is you're going to have your helper or somebody outside the pool use a net, whatever you need to do, get your toy, and then I would take them. I'm a bit of a suck, so I would probably take them down the ramp, throw another couple of confidence throwing tosses and retrieves off the ramp again, just encourage them to keep jumping off that ramp, and then I'd go back to the dock and try again. If you didn't do a restrained place throw the first time, I definitely would do it the second time, but that's all we're going to do. We're going to take them to the edge of the pool again, we're going to hold them back, we're going to throw our toy in, release them, and tell them to fetch the toy, basically. So we're just going to kind of keep repeating that, and if they're really stressing out at the side of the pool, I would probably just go back to the ramp work, keep building confidence, say for not necessarily the rest of that session, but if you're keeping your training sessions to kind of 5 or 10 minutes, per turn, I'll say, in a class or seminar type environment. I do a few confidence building off the ramp again, and then I would go back up to the dock, and really we're just going to have to keep repeating that until they get it. So that's all we're going to do. So if you see your dog getting stressed out at the edge, and you feel it's, at some point that's just not productive for them, it starts to give the dog a negative impression on them. They're not learning if they're stressed out, so we don't want to leave them in that state for very long, but it's okay for a short period of time, because we do want them stressed out a little bit so that they will jump in to get the toy. For the most part, that's all we're going to do. We're going to keep going from ramp work to the dock until they jump in on their own. And if they're jumping off the side of the ramp pretty confidently, that's going to happen pretty quickly off the dock. Again, we can use people, we can use other dogs to kind of encourage that. And you might find they get a little demotivated if they're stressing at the edge of the dock a little bit. So sometimes we might just have to take our toy. If we're pretty sure like they're close to jumping in, maybe they've got kind of 2 feet on the kind of the ledge, even off the dock, but just like the support ledge to the dock, but they're not quite making that final jump in. But like they're so close to doing it. Go play with them at the edge of the dock with their toy, tug with them, whatever it is, kind of get them ramped up to play again, and then quickly have somebody kind of, don't grab them and surprise them, but have somebody, as they're in that kind of amped up state, get them close to the edge of the dock, hold them back for that restrained, toss it in. So sometimes that's all you need, is just that little bit more amping up, a little bit more play on the dock, and then quickly go for a throw into the water, and sometimes they'll jump in before they even know it. So that's another way we can do it. And then just reward them whenever they're showing that confidence. So as soon as they do jump in, yell, cheer them on, tell them how smart they are. If if they get that 2 feet on kind of that ledge, if they're showing interest in jumping in, just encourage them, cheer them on, tell them you're happy with them. So if they are jumping in, we've got them jumping in, but sometimes there can be some kind of common problems that we want to troubleshoot. So the biggest, most common one is hesitation. So they are jumping in, but they're waiting 2 or 3 seconds before they jump in. So you might or might not be holding them, but you're going to throw the ball in. They're kind of going to stare at you like, why did you do that, you dummy? And then they jump in after maybe stressing out at the edge of the dock for a couple seconds. So we don't want them doing that in a competition or kind of long term, but a very common problem. So that's one of the reasons I recommended the restrained release. Just because that adds just a touch of frustration to them, because they want the toy and you're holding them back. So just like us, they have a bit of an opposition reflex. So we're going to use that a little bit to our advantage here. So if they're hesitating a little bit, as I suggested with just getting them off the first time, we can use this going forward as well. So, we can get them amped up, we can get them playing with their toy, and then we can have somebody restrain them a little bit with that life jacket or a collar hold or something like that, and then get them really amped up and, run to the edge of the dock, throw your toy, and then release them. So it's pretty common in flyball sports like that. Where you're just going to kind of hold that dog back just a little bit to get them kind of just that touch of frustration and opposition reflex working for you, so that as soon as you release them, they're like, oh, I gotta go. And sometimes that's enough. Also, just keeping them close to the dock edge will help as well. So we don't want to start them back 15 feet from, halfway down the dock. And while that's good long term, when we're starting to get further throws and we want them to have that speed and stride and cadence to get that kind of quality jump, sometimes that can lead to some hesitation when we're just starting. So if we start at the edge of the pool, especially with a restrained release, then they don't really, I don't want to say they don't have a choice. They have a choice whether they jump or not, but they don't have that long build up of like, oh, there's an edge, and kind of stress and worry about that. Their only choice is to jump or to not jump. So often that's enough to encourage them to jump a little faster rather than hesitate. So just keep them close to the edge. If you see them flailing kind of as they jump, so they're jumping but they're not kind of tucked in and tight, I kind of think of this like a skier or somebody like that jumping off of a ski jump. When it's done properly, they have a very specific place, all the body parts are. So they're trying to keep themselves aerodynamic, they're trying to keep tucked in so they can get the furthest distance possible. And I think it's the same with our dogs. So if they're jumping and their body's kind of loose, their legs aren't tucked in very nicely, they're kind of flailing around as they try and find the water, that's a good sign that they don't have a lot of confidence. So, they're jumping off the dock, but they're not very confident in it yet. So that could be a sign that you want to go back and do some ramp work, and it might be a sign that maybe you just need to alternate a little bit. So do a couple off the dock, then do a couple off the ramp. So just to build up their confidence, because they're still just a little unsure. All right, so if they don't retrieve the toy, so they're jumping in, but they're not retrieving the toy, that can be a common problem, especially if they're not that toy driven to start with. It's with the North American diving dogs, they actually don't, for the distance jump, they don't have to retrieve the toy. So you can compete even if they don't retrieve it, as long as they do jump into the water. So you don't have to I don't even think you have to use a toy. But it is better if you can. So if they're not retrieving the toy in the water, I would try and build the drive out of the water a little bit, or try a different toy. So that's what I would recommend. And just because ideally we want to use a toy, because that's it kind of allows us to encourage them to put their body the way we want. So if we want them to jump higher for an air retrieve, we can kind of start to train with a higher arc on our throw when we do throw it. So if your dog's not chasing or interested in that toy, they're probably not going to care what arc that toy is in. So if we're going for a distance jump, we might throw that arc longer and lower. If we're going for a higher air jump, we might throw it a higher arc, and but not the same distance. So that's why we do want to encourage them to play with a toy. So maybe just play around with some different toys, see what you can get them interested in off of the dock. Maybe they're just not interested enough, or maybe in the water we just have to start to train a little bit more drive in the water. So you could do that with different toys, maybe even just going back to your local lake, have them retrieve your dock diving toy and then reward them with their tennis ball or whatever that's a higher value. So if you can trade and kind of build some drive that way in the water, if the water itself is the problem, you can do that. You can ramp them up with the toy a little bit on the dock itself before you throw it. So that's kind of what I would do if your dog isn't retrieving the toy. But I'm thinking most of the time the issue is going to be they're just not that toy driven outside of the water. So I'd address that first. So the last issue, or most common issue, would be not stretching for the toy. This is going to be a little bit more advanced, but again, as I kind of mentioned, if they're not following that toy, that arc of the toy, it's going to be harder for us to kind of place their body where we want to. So if we find, they're diving more head first in versus level, or kind of bum first, which would be ideal. If they're not following the toy, it's harder for us to kind of manipulate their body position. So we do want to encourage them to stretch for the toy. So the AKC has put out a good video on what they call the chase method. And to use this method, basically we're going to throw the toy, but with the hope that the dog will catch it in the air before it lands in the pool. So for a lot of dogs, they would call it place it, but if we throw it into the water and then release the dog to go catch it, there's no incentive for the dog to really stretch for the toy or kind of follow its arc. They're just going to run off the dock however far they jump and then swim and get it. It's harder for us, again, just to manipulate where we want their body and how we want them to jump if they're not going for the toy. And so the best way to get them to go for the toy is this chase method. And as I said, the AKC has a really good video out on it. But basically, we're just going to encourage our dog to likely jump up and get the toy, but it could be jumping off the dock. So I'm going to throw the toy 2 or 3 feet off the dock, but up into the air, probably about at shoulder height for me with my dogs, but wherever your dog, maybe twice your dog's height, so that they do actually have to kind of jump and reach for it. But we can start that on the ground or on the dock. And again, just because dock time is expensive, I would start this at home. And, for me, I would just place the toy in my hand and encourage my dog to jump up and get it. So ideally, I want them to jump kind of up off their back legs, catch the toy, and land. So I can do this off of a platform like an agility table for a smaller dog or any size dog. Even just like off the curb on a sidewalk to jump up and get the toy. Whatever they need to do to actually use their body and jump up. So like Riggs is pretty lazy with his back legs. So he might jump up, but he's not really using his back end to push off really strong. So for him, maybe I'd set up an agility, if I had him on, say, an agility table, I might set up an agility jump really, really close to it. And have it at a very low level, like maybe 1 or 2 inches above the table. So if the table's 6 inches, I would set the jump height at 8 inches, something like that, just to really encourage him to not be lazy with his back legs and to actually jump up to get it, not just kind of stand up and get it. But that's the goal, is just to get them to kind of go more in an up, higher arc fashion. Bite the toy and then land. So that's kind of good groundwork we can do for it, and then we're going to build to jumping off the dock and going for a higher toy. And a frisbee, if you're good at throwing a frisbee, if you've played disc dog, a vault throw or a floater throw, that's going to have kind of quite a high hover time. It's going to be a higher throw and not go a very far distance, but it's just going to kind of go mostly up and down. And we want our dog to catch it kind of as it's going up and then land in the pool. So that's a good toy to use, but you can also just use a bumper, throw it with a higher arc, but we really want to encourage our dogs to bite it. And that's what's going to give them the motivation to really keep chasing the toy rather than just waiting for it to land, jumping in, swimming to it. So that's how we're going to encourage them to get those distance jumps or those high air jumps if they're really kind of trying to catch that toy versus just waiting for it to fall wherever it's going to fall and jump and swim to it. And I didn't mention, but on the dock, a majority of our throws, if not all of our throws, are going to be kind of underhand throwing. So that's kind of the arc we want them to follow, whether it's a distance jump or an air jump. It's going to be easier for you to to place the toy where you want it, so they'll catch it easier to be more consistent with it. And I've seen kind of different methods of throwing it. You're going to have to use whatever is most, I'll say, effective for you, whatever you're most consistent with. But if you're using a bumper type toy, I would try and throw it so that the bumper stays as level as possible. I've seen people that kind of throw it, I don't really know how to describe it, kind of, I'll say like a shooting star. But, you know, it's spinning kind of head over tail, and that's going to be a lot harder for your dog with that chase method. It's going to be harder for them to catch. It's also going to be, especially for puppies, they have a hard time tracking toys anyway. But any dog, it's going to be harder for them to track that. They might see the movement, but it's going to be hard for them to actually catch it. So if you can throw kind of a steady, fairly level throw with that bumper type toy, they're going to have a lot more chance at being successful at catching it, but also just tracking it better so that they know kind of how you want them to jump and what game they're playing today. So using that underhand throw is important, and will help you with that accuracy a little bit more and help your dog out. So the last thing I want to talk about was how to increase motivation once they are jumping off the dock. You know, it goes without saying, but praise your dog, praise your dog, praise your dog. The more encouragement and the more we tell them how happy we are with them, you know, the more confident they're going to be doing it. They have no idea what the heck this new game is and what we're trying to get them to do. You know, we're really playing a game of kind of warm and cold with them. So the more encouragement we can give them when they are warm and doing what we want, you know, the more likely they're going to want to do that again, and the more confidence they're going to have jumping off the dock. Reward when they return the toy to you, especially if they're not a super toy motivated dog anyway. But tug with them when they get to you. You can use a second toy and reward them with it. So throw a second toy on the dock when they bring that back to you. And you can throw another toy into the water if you're practicing. So, you know, whatever you need to do to reward them and tell them, yes, you're very happy with what they did. That's a great thing to do. I already talked about restrained retrieve quite a bit, but that's a great way to increase motivation to jump and fetch the toy. Just like I said, with us, we have that opposition reflex. So, you know, if somebody's kind of holding you back, it makes you want to do it all the more. So sometimes just that little bit of restraint before they are released to catch the toy will increase their motivation to jump and catch it. I just mentioned the chase method that we're going to use. So again, they're going to be a little more motivated if they actually do get to catch that toy at some point. So if we use that chase method and kind of place it with the intention that we want our dog to catch it in the air as they're jumping off the dock and before they land in the water, that's going to increase their motivation to get the toy because they actually get to catch it. So a lot of our dogs are very prey driven. So using that toy like prey, where, you know, they kind of self-reward when they get to catch it, will be to our advantage. And as I already said, finding the right toy or building toy drive will definitely increase their motivation. Sometimes you really have to play around to find what the right toy for your dog is and what motivates them. So like I said, you know, tennis balls often are not especially the kind of the rubber ones. They're great because they float, but they might not be a great choice because they, as your dog tries to bite them, they're slippery, so they might slide away. I know I found Tess was doing that quite a bit when we first started using that as our reward, and it was kind of like she's bobbing for apples. She couldn't catch it, so that's kind of distracting, a little bit demotivating. If they're kind of nervous about being in the pool, we really want them to snatch the toy and swim back to you, right? They're going to have the most success that way versus kind of paddling around in the water when they're first introduced. So for her, she's not super, because she is nervous, as I kind of mentioned. She probably would bring back just about any toy, but tennis balls are her favorite, so that's the best way for me to introduce the sport. I probably will switch to another toy once she's more confident. But I found with her, there are some, I can't remember what they're called, but they're a freezing toy by Chuck It. So they've kind of got a blue fabric material inside that absorbs the water, and then they've got kind of a softer orange rubber around it. So the orange rubber is slippery, but it kind of has gaps in it where you can kind of see, or where that water can drain out of that blue fabric inside of it. So for her, just to have those gaps was enough that she could grab onto it and kind of get her teeth around those to get enough of a grab that she could bring it back. Riggs, with that same toy, destroyed it. He within 5 seconds of chewing it, of course he loved it, but 5 seconds of chewing it and he's destroyed that rubber. But Tess is much gentler on the toy, so that works for her. So but you just kind of have to play with it a little bit. She also really likes the Kong Aqua, so that's a good toy for her. It's a lot more like a ball than a bumper would be. And the Kong Wubba can be a really great choice for dogs that like kind of that tennis ball, but the Wubba's got kind of a neoprene, the water version, and so it's going to be easier for them to grab versus a tennis ball. So just play around with toys a little bit. I know that sounds rich coming from somebody who has a pet store that sells toys, but really it's just a bit of trial and error to find the right toy and to build up drive with the right toy to get them interested. With the North American diving dogs, if you're doing air retrieve or the hydro dash, you do need to use the Nerf competition stick, and it's, in my opinion, it's not a toy that many dogs would naturally be super driven to play with. So even for a more toy motivated dog like Riggs, we're going to have to kind of build that drive for that particular toy up. So just because you use a certain toy for training or to introduce the sport to your dog and the pool to your dog, that doesn't mean you have to use that toy forever. But we want them to have success and start jumping off that dock with confidence. So we want to use whatever toy we need to build that habit and kind of that mental association, that positive association with dock diving. And then we can start to introduce other toys that maybe we need for competition or for more accuracy or whatever. So definitely just playing around with toys a little bit and building toy drive is important. If you found that helpful, you're going to want to get started training right away. So you've already requested this video, you're still watching it, you've listened to everything I said, and you already know that if you start to use this training from this webinar, you're going to have really great success starting your dog dock diving. And that's why you're going to want to check out our new Jumpstart package. So if you want to know what toys you need to have to get started, when it's okay to force your dog into the pool, what to do if your dog doesn't jump from the dock, how to fit a life jacket for your dog, and why you should use one with your dog, why all dogs can benefit from using a life jacket, even if they already know how to swim, how to start dock diving, even if you don't have access to a pool. You need to have a retriever, right? Wrong. You need to know the 3 things to look for the best natural place to train. How to start dock diving, even if you don't have your own private lake access and dock. You need to have a dog that loves toys, right? Wrong. How to eliminate hesitation when jumping. The number 1 thing you should never do when introducing the dock to your dog. When it's okay for your dog to bite. How to dock dive even if you haven't done any dog training before. Why retrievers might not be the best dog for dock diving. And finally, how to say goodbye to a dog that doesn't swim. So if you want to know how to do all of that, we've covered quite a bit of this in this webinar already, but we're going to be able to cover it in a lot more detail in our Jumpstart package. So if you're interested in knowing some more details on all of those questions, we've created this Jumpstart package just for you. So what have we included? We wanted to give you the 3 best toys to introducing dock diving. The 3 toys we've seen most people have the most success for training with, and the toys a lot of dogs are really motivated to play with. So we've included the Kong Wubba, $24 value. This has a neoprene exterior, so that does help it float. And it also gives it a little bit of a grip, so it's easier for dogs to bite onto. So this is a great tennis ball alternative as you start to play dock diving for a dog that really likes more that ball type toy. We've also included the Chuck It bumper, a $21 value. This is a really great bumper to introduce dock diving with. It's got a softer material in the center, so it's a great introductory bumper. Because a lot of dogs don't really like that hard bumper to start with, or that hunting bumper, the plastic hunting bumper. So this Chuck It bumper is a lot softer. It's got a really durable fabric exterior, and so it's got a good grip, but stands up fairly well. And both ends are kind of this foam ball material, so that helps it float a little more. Also gives it some contrasting colors, so it's easier for the dog to find in the water, and it sits really high in the pool, so it's easy for the dog to see, easy for them to grab onto, and they don't come up kind of choking and gagging up all that water. So that's a really great toy to include as we start to teach it. The bumper is also a really great toy, kind of weight-wise, balance-wise. It's not as heavy as some of the other bumpers, so it'll move around a little bit more in the wind, but it's very balanced for you to throw, so it's easier to keep that level throw I was talking about earlier, easier for your dog to track and follow as it flies through the air. So a really great toy for dock diving. And then finally, we have the Chuck It Paraflight. This is, again, a floating toy. It sits high in the water when it does land, so it's easier for a dog to grab onto. For smaller dogs, we do have a smaller version of this, but either of these two frisbees. And this one's great as we start to get into that air retrieve training, that chase training, where we really want the dog to go on and bite it. So we're going to use that vault throw, if you're familiar with disc dogging, and it's just going to kind of float, as I said earlier, in the air a little longer, giving your dog the time to go and actually bite and catch it before they land in the water. So that's 3 really great toys to introduce dock diving with. And you have to play around a little bit, so that's why we wanted to give you 3, so you could kind of see which one really clicks with your dog before you invest in a lot of other toys, because you can waste a lot of money on toys that don't work or aren't quite right for any sport, but definitely for dock diving. So we also wanted to include as a bonus, because these toys are great, but you also have to know how to use them and how to get the most out of them. So we wanted to include a little bit of training. So we've included a quick start dock diving system, which is over 5 hours of training videos and resources. So you'll know how to find the right toy for your dog and for you. You'll know how to fit a life jacket for your dog and how to use it, what to expect the first time you go to a pool, how to solve common training mistakes, different association resources so you can get started competing if you'd like, a games guide, how to register with the North American Diving Dogs Association, and how to enter your first trial, where to go when you get there, what to bring with you to your first trial, and then some mindset tips for competing, and lots more. So we've got $197 value for that quick start dock diving system, and we're adding training material to that all the time for you. So that's a total value. The Jumpstart package with 3 dock diving toys, $67. The quick start dock diving system, $197 value, for a total value of $264. But of course, we're not going to ask you to pay that. So we're going to give you all of that price today for just $67. And in case you're still thinking this might not be the real deal, if for any reason you don't like it and don't think you got your money's worth, we're going to give you a 30-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked. Just send us an email within the first 30 days and let us know. You don't even have to send the toys back. So as an added bonus, you're also going to receive our 7-step dock diving blueprint, so you'll know exactly what to work on and when, and this is really just step by step to go through some of the stuff we've covered here today, but just to give you an additional, more training based, like a training plan that you could follow, similar to you might get in like a 6-week training course for any other sport, but just step by step what you need to do to get your dog going in dock diving. So how's that for over delivering? So just to recap, you're going to receive our Jumpstart package, Kong Wubba, $24 value, Chuck It Bumper, $21 value, Chuck It Paraflight for $22 value, total of $67 value for all 3 of those. Our bonus number 1 is our Quick Start Dock Diving System with over 5 hours of training videos and resources, so you'll know how to start training your dog and prepare for and enter your first competition. A total value of $197. And our bonus number 2 is our dock diving blueprint, 7 easy to follow steps to methodically progress through your dock diving training. Total value of $37. For a grand total of $301, but you are receiving this all today for $67. So of course we can't offer this forever, so the offer does end. In order to focus on getting you up and running with our Jumpstart package, we only offer it once a month at most, and typically only over the summer months. So if you miss it now, you're going to miss a good chunk of what's left in the summer to get started. So definitely act on this now while we can. We really want to make sure we help you out so you can get started and play this really fun game with your dog. So again, we kind of keep that timeline short so we can focus on you in our Facebook group and answering questions you have, and just get out all this material to you as quickly as possible. So if you're really committed to training and having fun dock diving with your dog this summer, order your Jumpstart package now.